Oh boy. You know, my consider turning down video settings. You know, it's not easy. Okay, let's see if we can get this thing started here. This is the third Sociology Saturday. And, well, let me first set it up and we'll go from there. So I've been every Saturday sort of coming in to work, which is kind of sad, actually. But I've been coming into work and I'll spend an hour just sort of talking about an issue that's related to my discipline. And so this is my third one. The first two, they're getting progressively better. The first one, the sound was terrible, and I didn't know for the first 10 minutes, right? So that was bad. The second one, I had trouble with the images. I may still have trouble today. We'll see. But I think I kind of at least figured out what I need to do. And so here's the third one. And I like to go for about an hour. And I don't expect a lot of people to tune in. I mean, this is a new thing I'm trying. But I do record them, and then I upload them or make them available to watch later. So, you know, maybe someone will come in and they want to learn a little sociology. Or in some ways, it's not just about the discipline of sociology. It's also about the politics of sociology in society, right? So I have this Substack where I do the same thing. You know, I talk about social issues through a sociological lens, but then I can also take that lens and look back at sociology. So today I'm going to talk about, is sociology biased? By extension, I'm also talking about whether or not social sciences in general are biased, but I know my discipline best. So eventually I'll narrow it down to sociology and just talk about sociology. Oh, hi, Mike. How are you doing? I hope I think the first one, Mike was the one who hung out with me for a little while, and he told me about my bad microphone. So I think I've gotten better with that. So, but yeah, I'm gonna start broadly about social sciences in general, but then my examples will be primarily from sociology. And this actually has some meaning for me, this idea of bias, because I thought for a long time that sociology was biased. In fact, I'm going to show a video from Heterodox Academy. I'll stop and comment. It's about 3 minutes long. But I was of the type of like, yeah, we need to have more diversity, viewpoint diversity in sociology. So let me join this Heterodox Academy and let's support this mission of bringing more ideas onto college campuses. And then over the past year, I've been working on, maybe 6 months or so, I've been working on an online or an edited volume of research. And I realized that there's such a diversity of views until this notion of sociology being biased and being, you know, narrow in their viewpoint. I'm not entirely sure that's true at all. In fact, at the end of the story, when all this is said and done after about an hour, I'm going to make the argument that really this is just a way to platform conservative talking points. It may not have started that way, but that's how it's turned out. So let me kind of dive in here, and I'm going to show this Heterodox Academy YouTube video. It's 3 minutes. It's a good one, actually, and some of the points are very good. And so I'll play, and then I might stop and say a little bit about it. And then after showing this, I'll move into my my song and dance, my response to this, I guess.
What is reason? Philosophers have long told us it is humanity's highest and noblest attribute. It's what separates us from other animals. It's what allows us to separate truth from falsehood. There's just one problem. When psychologists study real people trying to reason, what they find is that reason has a gigantic, crippling flaw. It's called the confirmation bias. People don't use their reasoning abilities to find the truth. They use reason to confirm the views that they already hold. Now put people into teams where everyone holds the same beliefs, and the confirmation bias grows into a collective mania. Everyone helps everyone else find reasons why their side is right, further deepening shared bonds.
You know what? This is true. I mean, it is absolutely the case that we use our reason to confirm what we want to believe. That's actually true in the abstract. I'm not entirely sure that that's what's going on campus. And moreover, I'm not entirely sure that the solution that they provide actually works, right? They've already started with this two sides thing, which I already believe is problematic. In any case, yeah, there is confirmation bias, absolutely. But how it goes down on campus is that we have mechanisms to deal with that confirmation, and their solution actually makes it worse, I believe. But in any case, let me continue here. It's a pretty good video. I like it, actually.
Heaven help any individual who thinks for herself or who looks for evidence on the other side. Such people are called traitors, and groups have many ways of shutting them up. When everyone's beliefs line up, and when dissenters are punished, that's the definition of orthodoxy. Orthodoxy can be great if you're heading into battle and you want everyone marching in lockstep, but what if your goal is truth rather than victory? What if you actually wanted to help students overcome their confirmation bias and learn about the perspectives of others? What if you wanted to create a community of researchers who could actually study and solve social problems?
Okay, so I don't even agree with the premises here. I mean, they're implying that somehow, I'm going to back up and show that slide again.
To help students overcome their confirmation bias.
What if you actually wanted to help students overcome their confirmation bias and learn about the perspectives of others? Well, it's almost as if they're saying professors don't want to do that. I have never seen a professor walk into a class and say, all right, here is one way of looking at this. I've never seen that. I've never even seen professors say there are two ways of looking at something, or three, at least in sociology, in criminology, which is my domains. It's actually too much information. Really, we have to narrow it down, because for any idea, there are several perspectives. There's several perspectives. What's actually happening here is they're conflating politics and scholarship. If you simply look at scholarship, forget it. There's so many perspectives, it's really difficult to even say which one is the best. So scholars have broad consensus based on preponderance of evidence, but when you start drilling down, you've got so many different ways of looking at things until this notion that somehow students aren't challenged to think about things differently is crazy. And then the second part.
And learn about the perspectives of others. What if you wanted to create a community of researchers who could actually study?
What if you wanted to create a community of researchers who could actually study and solve social problems? What are they implying? Are they saying that a sociologist or criminologist or psychologist, they're really talking about social sciences primarily. Are they arguing that somehow these scholars are not studying and solving social problems? Furthermore, I don't think that necessarily having views from the left and right, which is what they're implying, necessarily leads to a better conclusion. In fact, oftentimes it actually makes things worse, because you have to consider ideas or talk about ideas or waste time on ideas that we know from past experiences are not credible or just don't have any evidence surrounding them. I'm not saying that we don't need to have different people looking at things from different angles. I'm just saying that what Heterodox Academy is arguing is just not true. I mean, people are studying and solving problems now, and they're already looking at it from different angles. So if someone sees this and they're not in the academy, they're going to believe that professors walk in a classroom and tell students, okay, you must think this one way. This is the way you must think. Furthermore, they're gonna believe that professors aren't studying and solving social problems because they have this groupthink. Now, it is true that there is confirmation bias, and it is true that there's groupthink, but there's a variety of perspectives in social science, And I just don't see this idea that people are all thinking the same. I would even challenge, to anyone to ask a professor, okay, tell me the answer. And they'll probably sit down and talk to you for about an hour about the 5 or 6 different ways that people have thought about this issue. And yeah, there may be a preponderance of evidence in one direction, but finally there are these many perspectives. So I don't know. In 2018, when I joined Heterodox Academy, I kind of believed that. I kind of bought into this, or maybe 2017 or something when I joined. I kind of bought into this, but now it's like, no, this is crazy. This is not true at all. So, okay, I'm gonna go to my slides now and talk a little bit about my argument here, because I'm going to be more specific and say a little bit, be a bit more clear about whether or not sociology is biased. Of course, I'm going to say that it is, but not to the point that it's damaging the science, because we're all biased. But the bias that Heterodox Academy points out, this whole narrative of heterodoxy, I think is very misleading and damaging. So before I get to that, let me say that the evidence that I'm pulling is from my own experiences as well as these 2 articles. So this notion of heterodoxy and confirmation bias is something that we've been talking about for quite a while. Since the 80s, or maybe even since the 60s, conservatives especially have been talking about how college campuses are liberal. So this isn't new. Okay, it sort of gained steam in the past 10 years, but it's been around for a long time. In any case, Inside Higher Ed, a very reputable publication, summarized in these 2 articles the evidence about bias on campus. And so I'm pulling from this, as well as my own personal ideas and experiences on a college campus. So you can look at these on your own time and read it for yourself, but this is where I'm getting most of my information from. So let's see here. Now I got to find the slide. I can never tell the order of those slides. So are professors liberal? And the answer is yes, absolutely. I'm certainly liberal. And all the professors in my department, except maybe one that I know of, they are liberal and they vote Democrat. So that's true. Now here is one of the more cited research papers about that, and it looked at several departments in the top schools. So I think it was the top 40. And this is what you're seeing here. Maybe I can make this a little bit bigger. What you're seeing here is the ratio of liberal to conservative. So in economics, it's fairly low, but still it's still 4.5 to 1, liberal to conservative. And if you look at history, wow, this is something. 33. I mean, that seems almost unreal. 33 to 1, round up 34 to 1, journalism 21. I mean, that's really something. So you say to yourself, wow, I mean, you've got all of these liberals in these departments. That has to have some effect, right? Well, let's break it down. Let's break it down here. And by the way, I didn't see in that particular study, sociology was not there. But I have no doubt that sociology would have a high liberal to conservative ratio, maybe as high as history or higher, because people in Soc tend to be quite to the left. But I don't have that data in front of me. But I'm sure that it's in line with this data here. So let me break this down a little bit. Because sociologists are liberal, right? And I'm assuming that sociologists would follow in that same line as those other disciplines. Because sociologists are liberal, sociology departments are biased in 2 ways, right? These are the 2 ways. Professors do biased research, and professors indoctrinate students. And I'm putting these things in quotes, so that's kind of telling you where I'm going with this. This sounds like they're trying to instill a sense of conservative victimhood. That's interesting. I actually think that that's a big thing. I'm not sure if Sounds of Saint Elsewhere knows about this woke, anti-woke thing that I'm always talking about on Twitter. But you've got this collection of folks. They may not necessarily be conservative, but they're always crying that something's wrong. they're always looking at these to me surface problems and saying that they're victims. Sort of getting to your point, right? So like an anti-woke person would complain about not being able to say the N-word, and that's a sign that, oh, woe is me type thing. And I'm like, wait a minute, man, that's a little minor issue there. That's what you're complaining about. But yeah, I think so. I think that they're trying to. I don't even know if they're instilling. I think there is already a sense within conservatives, white conservatives, that somehow America is becoming anti-white, which is crazy. There's no empirical evidence about this, but for some people, equality seems like oppression. So maybe that's a part of it. But in any case, so because sociologists are liberal, the logic goes, right? Sociology departments are biased in two ways. Professors do biased research, and professors indoctrinate students. So these two ways are the two primary tasks, the two primary things that scholars have to do. They have to do research, and then they have to teach. And so depending on where you are, you may do a lot more research. So maybe the Harvards and the universities of Chicago's of the world, or you have to do a half and half, like where I am now. It's a half teaching, half research school, or you could be at a community college where you're doing all teaching, right? But these are the two main things that academics have to do, and the institution itself. It's about research and teaching. Okay, so I want to talk about these two things here in turn, and let's see what slide pops up next, because I really have no idea. It's not it. Not yet. Nope. Okay. Professors do biased research. All right. So here's my take on this. It's in two parts. The first thing is that a bias does not mean a faulty conclusion. In other words, suppose I, as a progressive sociologist, decides that I want to study some aspect of race. At this point, I'm not studying race. Actually, I'm doing a lot of cyber stuff. But let's just say that I wanted to study, I wanted to look for racism amongst graduate students, right? I don't know. And so I said, I want to do this. I'm interested in this, right? Okay. Well, of course, because I'm progressive, that powers the question I ask, okay? However, if I am following accepted research methods and presenting my research to the public, the conclusion is not faulty. It's a valid and reliable conclusion. So sure, I'm interested in finding racism, right? I'm concerned about racism everywhere, right? Because that's progressives, right? That's the stereotype. We're looking for racism everywhere. So okay, fine. I'm looking for racism on college campuses and graduate school or something, right? Black women are being mistreated, something like that. Okay, I got to look for it. Now, if it's quantitative research and I collect survey data, if the data is not there, it's not there. And I don't think that academics are in the business of lying. So if their data shows some type of effect for being black, then they want to publish that. And it's not a lie. Now you could say that, well, they're looking for that, and so therefore, they're going to emphasize that. That's true. But it doesn't mean that the data is still not there. If someone is interviewing a person, which is a bit more difficult, actually, interviews, because so much of the interview is your interpretation. But even when you're doing qualitative research, there are mechanisms in place that you learn in your methods class to deal with that bias that you know is there. So at the end of the day, when you produce that qualitative study that turns into that book that a lot of people read and it gets written up in the New York Times and stuff, what's in there is a fairly accurate representation of reality. Certainly more accurate than your standard journalist or pundit, right? So you could certainly say that the questions are biased, but the research is not. If you've got sociologists producing a preponderance of evidence of transphobia, the evidence is still there, even if it is the case that the sociologists are interested in transphobia. Okay, so to me that's a little different. That's a little different than how those folks at Heterodox Academy are talking about things. And it's certainly different than how we talk about bias in everyday society, where we assume that, well, because these folks are liberal or progressive, then they're producing bad scholarship. No, not at all. Your political orientation has very little to do with the quality of your scholarship. It has more to do with the things that you're interested in. So I would not deny that. I would not deny that me being progressive, I'm interested in certain progressive issues. Even more, you have a wide range of topics where it doesn't matter what your political view is. It doesn't have anything to do with your question. So I am the research that I'm doing right now is looking at online sex work. I can be as progressive as I want. It's not going to change that much about this particular study. The questions I'm asking don't have to do with any particular political orientation. Right, so you do have studies that are political. You have some that are not, and your bias will matter in the question sometimes, but not the conclusion. Okay, the second part of this is so sounds of saying elsewhere, similar to the wider. So I'm all over the place. So I'll get to the second thing in a second. The second thing in a second. Social science is incredibly heterodox. But first, let me read what Sounds of Saint Elsewhere is saying. Similar to the wider alt-right effort to make people believe that conservatives in particular, that's the same thing. So I didn't read the second part of that chat. I'm sorry about that. It was like a two-parter. All right, well, I'll keep going. Next time I'll get it right. But I have to say, I am improving with these live streams. So I mean, there's some reason to be optimistic that I can keep getting better at this. So anyway, the second one is social science is incredibly heterodox already. As I was saying in the beginning, there is simply no topic where there aren't already 3, 4, 5, 6 ways of understanding it, and sociologists or social scientists just don't agree. They just don't. We might agree on a broad conclusion that there is systemic racism or something, or that crime is actually, even with crime. So like if I'm doing something on cybercrime, there is no agreement exactly as to what causes crime. We want to say that it's based on structure. We want to say that it's situational. But after those broad conclusions, man, there's so many different ways that people are trying to understand that. To assume that a department or discipline is orthodox is insane. Here's something. So I actually I closed the window, but I was looking at this online sociology textbook. It's called OpenStax, and so in every section of the textbook, they actually you know what? I want to pull that up. So those who might look at this later, they'll know what I'm talking about, because there are a lot of people who've either never taken a sociology class or it's been so long, and so they're buying into this narrative of heterodoxy. So I want to show this. So let me look it up here. Let's see here. Let me go to social sciences, sociology. Okay, yep. And let me go here, view online. So I'm going to go to a particular section of an intro to Social book. And it's a low-level intro to Social book as well. And I'm going to show you like the diversity even in this low-level textbook. So I said diversity. I could say heterodoxy. I guess is the words we're using. So can we see that? Yeah, you can see it on the screen. So what you're looking at here is the table of contents from a very, it's an online resource, right, about Introduction to Sociology. And here you've got theoretical perspectives on media and technology. Okay, cool. And if you look at the learning objectives, or you look at the content here on the side, it's sort of cut off, but you can see it. You've got one way of looking at media and technology is through a functionalist perspective. This is standard, actually. These sort of perspectives are standard across all topics. So you can take a functionalist perspective, whatever that's going to mean. Then you can have a conflict perspective, which is very popular, actually, the conflict perspective. Then you can look at a feminist perspective. Okay? Then you can look at symbolic interactionism perspective. So, I mean, just here in this small introductory level, and also, a very brief sociology textbook, you can already see real viewpoint diversity, not conservative and liberal, which is what Heterodox Academy is ultimately doing, I'll argue, but real heterodoxy. So, yeah, I mean, this idea that professors do bias research is just crazy. I don't buy it at all. Okay, so let me get to the second one here. Oh, and just to remind you, this is the argument here that I'm working with. Because sociologists are liberal, and social scientists in general, which we agree, I don't think anyone disagrees with that, then this means that sociology departments are biased in two ways. Professors do biased research, and professors indoctrinate students. Now, I've just talked about the biased research part, and I'm arguing that the questions are indeed biased, but the conclusions are not. So you can use the conclusions. They tell you about the world. They're just not asking the questions that you want asked. So for a conservative, they just need to know what they want asked. And I don't know, fund that research maybe? I'm not entirely sure. But it doesn't mean that you can dismiss it. And then second, the second argument is that professors indoctrinate students. So the climate on campus, basically, is hostile to conservatives. Okay. Kind of gets to that victimhood that Sounds of St. Elsewhere was talking about. So let me get to that critique of that. Okay. The first thing I would ask is, should all ideas be in play? I say no. I think that I, as a professor, am obligated to teach the general understandings from my discipline. To give an example, as I prepare for my class next week and then the week after, we're going to be talking about romance scams. And the thing about romance scams is that it plays on a person's need. This is my cybercrime class. It plays on a person's need. And then they need something, and so the scammer says, well, I'm going to provide it to you, whether that be emotional comfort, or just someone to kind of chat with, to socialize, what have you, right? So it plays on some need that the person has. This is the general understanding. Now, suppose a student comes to me in class or raises their hand and says, you know what, Professor Graham, women are more likely to be victims of romance scams, which we think is true. The data is, people don't like to report it, but we believe that to be the case. So the student says, okay, women are more likely to be victims of romance scams. You know why? I think it's because they're too emotional. They're not rational, Professor Graham. Women are just emotional creatures. And so if a guy comes along and says some fancy things and they'll give all their money away. Okay. That's a viewpoint. that's his viewpoint. Now, what is my obligation in that case? Am I supposed to say, that's a pretty good idea. Now, we don't have data yet to disprove that, so okay, that's something to think about. No, I should not do that. All ideas should not be in play. I should say, look, there's no evidence for that. Also, morally, that might be a bit problematic. so think about that. But certainly, just on an evidentiary basis, there's nothing to support this idea that the reason why women are more likely to be victims of romance scams is because they're too emotional and irrational. Right? So this kind of thing, I believe, happens all the time in classrooms. A student, may, say something that's way to the left or right, generally to the right, but it doesn't matter. Just out of bounds. And so the professor has the obligation to say, no, that's actually not what we know in our field. It would be silly for that person to just for that professor to entertain any and all ideas, right? So I'm not entirely sure. This is why I think they want to platform conservative viewpoints, really, because that's the only thing that I think they're trying to do. Because they can't possibly be saying that in a class where a person is talking about, let's take something very heinous like the Holocaust, they can't possibly be saying that a professor should not make it clear that what the Third Reich had done we see morally is wrong, or that the statistics show the deaths. What? What is that professor supposed to entertain that's outside of that, I don't know. It's just crazy. So all ideas should not be in play. That's the first thing. So you might call it indoctrination, but it's probably education. Right? It's probably education, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is, I do believe that there is a chilling effect on college campuses. The chilling effect means that, you think that what you're going to say is going to be shot down, so you just don't say anything at all. I do think that there's a chilling effect. But it doesn't come from us. In fact, I suffer from the chilling effect. I've retired my Friends and Beyonce and The Wire references because I know the minute I bring that up, students are going to be like, all right, what? Because, look, kids create their own norms and values that are not connected to what the professor wants them to believe or value. I'm not entirely sure how that's not obvious to people. Now, it is the case that when it comes to specific things that are linked to a grade and general ideas that students don't know anything about, it is the case that professors do have some influence. So if a student walks into my class, again, I'll use cybercrime since that's on my mind, and they don't know anything about hacking or about cyberbullying, what have you. Okay, fine. They'll take what I have to say and think that it is true, and I hope they do. But look, they don't care what I have to say about trans issues. That's something they learned on their own. If they're concerned about not having a job, or they're concerned about not being able to pay their rent, that's what's powering them. Not me saying, oh, you should think about more government spending. They're living that life. They're the ones who are enforcing these words. They're enforcing the not using the N-word or any of those words, N-word, C-word, F-word, these kinds of taboo words now. They're the ones enforcing that, not professors. So if you are concerned as a parent about the liberal climate on campus, blame your kids. Don't blame me. I didn't have anything to do with that, And so this idea that professors are indoctrinating students is just silly. I can't even indoctrinate my students into putting page numbers at the top right of their papers, much less get them to think differently about sexuality or politics or religion. Forget it. Again, I'm not saying that we don't have some influence, because we do, just not in these more, social and cultural areas. Our influence is really restricted to what's in the textbook. So if you want to say that, or what's going on in class, so if you want to say that, I indoctrinate students into seeing racism as structural, okay, if you think that, I mean, I don't know what to say. That's kind of what the evidence suggests. If you want to say that I'm indoctrinating students into a belief that we are overly punitive towards hackers, okay, maybe, right? But most of scholars believe that the laws we have against hacking are just too punitive. So I'm going to relay that to students. All right. So those are the two, big ideas about social scientists and sociologists in general being liberal. Let me go back to that slide here, and then I'll get to my critique. Okay. Now, yeah. So this is what I did. Because sociologists are liberal, sociology departments are biased in two ways. Now, we know they're liberal. But the implication would be that because of those political values, they do biased research. We do biased research, and we indoctrinate students. And my argument is that, no, you got to look at this in a more complex way. Our questions are indeed biased, and that's something to talk about, actually. That's something to consider. It would be interesting if I don't know what conservatives want, actually. I don't know what kind of questions they want answered. They want to know how to start more small businesses. I really don't know. But whatever it is, ask it, find a way to get that question asked. Fund research projects. I mean, professors love grant funding. So if there's something that a conservative organization wants answered, then they need to ask that question. I can tell you what, though. You can get 20 far-right scholars to look at race in the U.S. And they can look at it from all the different angles, qualitative, quantitative. You can look at big data. They can do experiments. However they want to do it, they're still going to find that race matters, because your ideology does not impact social patterns. It might impact how you perceive them, certainly, but it's still out there. You can't hide that unless they're lying. There's no way that 10 or 20 or 100, it doesn't matter, people who are conservative will do legitimate research where they're asking a question about race and not find racism. They will find stereotypes. They will find discrimination. They will find prejudice. So the patterns are out there. So really what conservatives have to do is ask different questions, probably. And then we'll see what they come up with, whatever those questions are. So professors do biased research. I don't think that's entirely true. There needs to be a more nuanced understanding of that. And then professors indoctrinate students. And no. Again, I'm providing nuance here by saying that the particular ideas coming from our discipline, we are trying to teach them that. But that's education. That's not indoctrination. Moreover, these social and cultural and political ideas that these young people have, that's on them. They came to college that way. We didn't give them that. Okay, now let me get to my critique of this heterodox discourse, which, by the way, I was a member of Heterodox Academy. I don't know if I'm still on the rolls or not, but I think I unsubscribed from the mailing list, and I haven't been active. So maybe they said, okay, Rod, we got it. I don't know. But this is my critique of the heterodox discourse. Ultimately, the goal is to platform conservative views regardless of empirical evidence or interest by the public. So I think this started, Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff, I believe. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. They have some legitimate concerns. They really believe that there needs to be some more ideas on campus. There's something that they want talked about. Okay, fine. I don't know Jonathan Haidt very well. I have communicated with him. I've never communicated with Greg Lukianoff. And I'm sure that they're genuine in that interest. It's not some ulterior political motive. So I'm pretty sure of that. The problem is that discourse grows because you have people who are centrist and conservative who want their ideas platformed and see this as a way, a vehicle of getting those ideas on college campuses, regardless of their empirical support. So you have conservatives out there who are like, look, those black folks, it's their culture. Something I talked about in a prior live stream. It's their culture, and we want to talk about that on college campuses. But they want that for political reasons. The scholarship doesn't support that. It never has. Culture does matter, as I mentioned before, but usually in individual circumscribed situations, people are generally, though, responding to structure. And it's always going to be that way. It's always going to be that way as human beings. Culture comes from structure, and culture changes over time, and it always modifies itself to the structure of the environment that it's in. So it doesn't matter if conservatives want to talk about that. It ain't happening. Or want to find evidence for that, I should say. It's not happening. It's just not. But they want to talk about that in a classroom, regardless of the evidence. That's wrong. And that's what gained steam. That's what has gained steam. These types of people, or that is what is giving steam to this discourse, is that these people who I think are very disingenuous, they just want to talk about conservative ideas. They don't care anything about heterodoxy. They'd be happy if we just talked about conservative stuff. So the goal is to platform conservative views. Mouth is getting dry. Regardless of empirical evidence or interest by the public. Now, this second part is a bit dicey, because academia needs to do research regardless of what the public wants. It just needs to follow its own course wherever the science takes it. So academia needs to do that. At the same time, we do have an obligation to society to address the problems of our time. This is I would say, a relatively new mission for academia, probably starting with the Second World War, where the government and the military started recruiting scientists to create technologies to prosecute the war. And so, we've been like that for a while now. So it's an interplay between society and academia. Okay, so academia needs to go on its own course when it can. We need pure science, right, where a person just sits down and says, okay, I'm interested in this. This is what we know. Let's push the boundaries. But we also need applied science, where it's like, okay, we're concerned about transphobia. We're concerned about romance scams. We're concerned about systemic racism. We're concerned about suicide, depression, what have you. And so please study this, and let's see what we can do about it. So it's both. So the thing is, though, the concerns that we have tend to be on the progressive side. Progressives are more likely, when it comes to social issues, to ask questions of academics. I think that businesses and technology, businesses, computer science, engineering, that may fall more to the right. I'm not entirely sure, but maybe. But these social issues that we're concerned about, that's coming from the left. And so we want those things answered. And so sociologists, and social scientists in general, are willing to address those concerns. So what's happening with this heterodox discourse is you've got these two things. You've got trying to platform conservative views in a classroom, regardless of empirical evidence, and ignoring what the public wants for this small percentage of conservatives who either don't care about these issues or are concerned about something niche. That's the problem here, and that's my critique, and that's unfortunate, because I think that it would be nice, actually, to have a wider array of things being asked on campus. Even though the evidence we have now is solid, you can't dismiss it. There's still questions. I mean, the more questions, the better, I think, right? But it needs to come from a real sincere place. And I'm just not entirely sure that that's what's happening with the heterodox discourse. All right, so I think I've reached the end here. This has been my third live stream. They're getting better. They really are. I'm getting a bit more comfortable just kind of rambling here, but staying on topic. And my graphics are getting better. Thanks, Mike, for passing by. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Sounds of Saint Elsewhere. And you asked some, I want to say bro, but I don't know, so I'll just say person. You asked some very, very tough questions or make some pretty incisive comments like that. Like, I remember last time you were talking about Black studies, and I was like, okay, what is he talking about? What is he going? So I mean, you know, thank you for popping in, and I really appreciate it. And I don't know what the topic will be next week, but generally what I'm doing now is I write a weekly column for the editorial board, and I have a Substack. So what I'm trying to do is be a bit more efficient. And so this topic I'll turn into an essay for the editorial board, and I then may also write a longer one for my Substack. So, you know, I'll do the same thing next week. I'll come up with a topic that I'm going to write about, and so I'll turn that into a Sociology Saturday. Okay, take care, guys.